Okay, we are streaming now. Yep, looks like everything's good. Okay, so today is the exciting part. We're at World War II and the rise of what's this guy's name? He Hitler, Adolf Hitler. Um, and Jews declare war on Germany, 1933. Jared's going to be going over um, who financed uh, the sides of the war, the Bush's the involvement, um, the guy that you were telling me about that the railroad tycoon
Harriman.
Harriman. Um, I'm assuming since it says Jews declare war on Germany, I'm assuming that starts out with when they went and started doing the boycotts, I'm assuming.
Yes, sir.
And then they ran all the printing presses, right? Or they had a big monopoly on a lot of magazines. Is that what it was?
Yeah, media, newspaper. Um,
Okay. And then, oh, I meant to ask you, but I guess it's a good time now since we're on this topic. Um, was it uh fuck, I just down here it's on my phone. I just downloaded some meme or image and it was okay, so in it says Louisiana Senator Huey Long was poised to win the 1936 presidential election against Franklin Roosevelt. This would have prevented America from entering into World War II and allying with Judeo Bolsheviks, but a Jew named Karl Weiss assassinated Huey Long before the election. I thought that was pretty good. I don't know if you've heard that before. I didn't know that.
no, I wasn't aware of that either.
Yeah, very
Fun little,
interesting.
yeah, it's a fun little tidbit.
So, what? Okay. This OBS thing is kind of being silly. Um, all right. So I guess wherever you want to start, I'll give you the ball.
So I wanted to first discuss Jews declaring war on Germany through the boycott. I'm going to be getting into some of the different articles and discussions that were had by Jews, and then from there we'll dive into a book by, I believe his name was James Poole, if I'm not mistaken. This Mr. Poole wrote The Rise of Hitler, and we'll be getting into some of that. And then afterwards, we'll jump into some of the dealings that went on that helped finance Hitler. Um, the Bush family from believe Union Bank Corporation, um, Averill Harriman, and a Fritz uh, Thyssen, and some of the other people around them around in the peripherals. So in the Daily Express headline on March 24th, 1933, Judea declares war on Germany. It's that famous article many are probably familiar with. For those who aren't, this was an effort by Jews around the world and a call to Jews around the world to unite and engage in a boycott of German goods and mass demonstrations. So many of these headlines I'm going to read are from this Daily Express on March 24th, 1933. The Israeli people around the world declare economic and financial war against Germany. 14 million Jews stand together as one man to declare war against Germany. The Jewish wholesaler will forsake his firm, the banker his stock exchange, the merchant his commerce, and the pauper his pitiful shed in order to join together in a holy war against Hitler's people. Each of you, Jew and Gentile alike, who has not already enlisted in this sacred war, should do so now and here. It is not sufficient that you should buy no goods made in Germany. You must refuse to deal with any merchant or shopkeeper who sells any German-made goods or who patronizes German ships or shipping. We will undermine the Hitler regime and bring the German people to their senses by destroying their export trade on which their very existence depends. And this was said by Samuel Undermeyer in a radio broadcast on WABC New York on August the 6th, 1933. And it was reported in the New York Times on August the 7th, 1933. So joining with Samuel Undermeyer in calling for war against Germany, Bernard Baruch at the same time was promoting preparations for war against Germany. I emphasize that the defeat of Germany and Japan and their elimination from world trade would give Britain a tremendous opportunity to swell her foreign commerce in both volume and profit. Baruch stated in The Public Years by Bernard M. Baruch, page 347. And Samuel Undermeyer was a Jewish leader and close friend of Presidents Wilson and Roosevelt. And Bernard Baruch was a presidential advisor to Wilson, Roosevelt, and Truman. So
before you go any further with that, so I was listening to an interview with a guy, and he was talking about how Zelensky's top advisor was a year before the war started talking about how Ukraine, in order for them to get to be able to join NATO, had to go and instigate a major war with Russia in order to prove themselves to be able to join NATO. I thought that was kind of coincidental that very similar little backstory to present day and the past.
And that will eventually kind of tie into what I'll get to at the very end of this discussion, because I believe that this is my opinion, and speaking from the information that I've gathered, I lean towards the idea that Hitler was more or less working on behalf of the Rothschilds, and without World War II, Israel, as we know it today, couldn't have been created. The Balfour Declaration was doing its part to allow Jews to migrate to British mandated Palestine after World War I, but Jews were reluctant to leave Europe. They were happy in Paris. They were happy in London, France.
Do you think he
Austria.
actively did that, or do you think he was more of a fall guy?
So that is debatable, but I would like to present the case that he was conscious of these things. He knew he was doing business with. He wasn't a stupid man. He had the backing of intelligence with the SS and the ability to investigate the people who were funding him. And with that in mind, he, I'm sure, was conscious.
Well, so before
to
you
what
go,
no, please.
before you go too far into that, because you mentioned the SS, which was Goring's control, right? who had. So this is where I would say that I think Hitler put too much faith and actually was a little too sympathetic to, I think it was Goring, who had like a Jewish father. And the only reason that, like, there's some long story. I don't remember the whole conflated events, but like he was like the bastard son of like some Jewish guy. And he was, he really was a big fuck up when it came to Hitler putting too much what is it? Not resolve, but like trust in him. Um because he did a lot of the shit that Zelensky does, where he took a lot of the budget and used it on himself. He was supposed to be um like he had weird titles, like he was head of the Luftwaffe, but he was also like head of like the forestry division. And uh towards the end of and started like the failures of World War II for Germany, I'd say a lot of the failures really came from Goring and his kind of just malaise and not really like doing anything. And the SS was actually more of a peak unit. They were kind of the ones keeping it together versus the Gestapo and brown shirts, who were basically made up of uh, pedophiles, criminals, degenerates, and maybe farmers or hunters. Um, so that's, I mean, I can't say either way, but if I was to give Hitler an out as far as his his failures, I would say that a big part of it, and it's pretty clear through a lot of his speeches or his writing, I think, is that his disappointment in the generals. Like I was watching that speech from Downfall, um, where there was that meme that Slav posted from, and he like goes on a tirade against his generals and their failures. And I think, like, I always heard that he didn't listen to his generals, but then in that little scene, he talks like viciously about how they failed him, and it seemed a lot like he was putting a little too much trust into that group. Um, and I think there was one more thing I was going to mention, but I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Well, that is very interesting, and I do think as the Fuhrer and as the leader of the German people and the de facto um person where the buck stopped, should he had should he have had apprehension towards certain individuals in the manner in which they manage things, he could have taken action. And I will get into more detail on some of the things that transpired that caused me to question who the man was, and I'll be discussing a small snippet from the Bible, from the New Testament, Matthew 7, 15, chapter 7, 15 through 20, and that beware of wolves in sheep's clothing, and you shall know a man by his fruits.
What
But I don't.
what do you think though about, so like today I just happened to be listening to Hitler talking about Palestine. Um, and I wasn't able to source it, but it seemed like it was a real um, speech from him. And one of the things that he was definitely famous for was his speeches. And it seemed like a lot of what he was saying was way more passionate versus like when you listen to Trump and you have all the sycophants that like love Trump, like it's very clear to see that he's a um like a buffoon and a retard, and that he's like selling us out. But like it, because when Trump talks, it's like a third grader that forgot that the presentation was due today, and then he's sitting up in front of the class and he like keeps repeating like, and Germany, it's a big country, and then when you speak, like when you listen to Adolf talk, he definitely seems to have like knowledgeable like arguments behind what he's saying, and it seems a little harder to fake that.
And I wouldn't deny for a moment that the things that he said um were were spot on. And I just am slightly apprehensive. I'm still not 100% sure on this idea. I am slightly on the fence, but I do lean towards the idea that he was conscious of what it is he was doing. There is reason to suggest that he was the son of a Rothschild. That is debatable. His I believe it was grandmother um, or mother was a maid in a Rothschild's manor in Austria, if I'm not mistaken. So again, these things are debatable, but the things he spoke were spot on. I had a coworker shared something with me about Germany defending the Christian people and going to war with people who were anti-Christian, and to defend not just Germany but the world from Jews. So he spoke well, and the things he was saying were spot on. And some of the actions, like burning the LGBTQ and the transgender books, and some of the things that he did early on, suggest that he was on the side of the people of Germany. But then some of the other things that transpired, which we'll get into, um, are contradictory to the words he said, and can paint a different picture.
Do you think
So
that does that lead you to the conclusion that he was still alive, or did he kill himself?
no, I believe he lived and went to Argentina, and he was allowed to escape.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So with that said, we'll jump back into a little bit more from the Jews declaring war on Germany. This declaration called the war against Germany, which is now determined on a holy war. This war is to be carried out against Germany to its conclusion, to her destruction. That's from Dr. Franz J. Schiedel in Geschichte der Verfilmung Deutschlands. I don't know if that's a German newspaper. I'm not familiar with it. War in Europe in 1934 was inevitable. This is from H. Morgenthau, Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, and that was found in the Hearst Press, September 1933. It's also quoted in the Palestinian Plot by B. Jensen, page 11. For months now, the struggle against Germany is waged by each Jewish community at each conference in all our syndicates, and by each Jew all over the world. There is reason to believe that our part in this struggle has general value. We will trigger a spiritual and material war of all the world against Germany's ambitions to become once again a great nation, to recover lost territories and colonies. But our Jewish interests demand the complete destruction of Germany, collectively and individually. The German nation is a threat to us, Jews. It's by Vladimir Jabotinsky. founder of the Jewish terrorist group Irgun, and in Masha Reich in January 1934. Hitler will have no war, in quotations or parentheses, pardon. He does not want war, but we will force it on him, not this year, but soon. That's by Emil Ludwig Kohn in Les Annales in June 1934. It's also quoted in his book, The New Holy Alliance. We Jews are going to bring war on Germany. David A. David A. Brown, national chairman of the United Jewish Campaign in 1934. It's quoted in I Testify Against the Jews by Robert Edward Edmondson, page 188, and in The Jewish War of Survival by Arnold Less on page 52. We want to bring about a deep hatred for the Germans, for German soldiers, sailors, and airmen. We must hate until we win. Lord Beaverbrook, quoted in Niemals by Heinrich Goethe. There is only one power which really counts, the power of political pressure. We Jews are the most powerful people on earth because we have this power and we know how to apply it. That's more from Vladimir Jabotinsky from the Jewish Daily Bulletin, July 27th, 1935. Before the end of the year, an economic bloc of England, Russia, France, and the USA will be formed to bring the German and Italian economic systems to their knees. This is by Paul Dreyfus, Levi de Tanger, May 15th, 1938. On the 3rd of June, 1938, the American Hebrew boasted that they had Jews in the forefront positions of influence in Britain, Russia, and France, and that these three sons of Israel will be sending the Nazi dictator to hell. Interesting. He called Britain, Russia, and France three sons of Israel.
Yeah.
Germany is our public enemy number one. Is it our object to declare war without mercy against her? One may be sure of this: we will lead that war. Bernard Lacache, president of the International League Against Racism and Anti-Semitism, in its newspaper Droit de Vivre, some French nonsense, on the 9th of November, 1938.
So, and that's very close to when the terms racism, anti-Semitism were first invented, correct?
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, both words were created by Jews. I believe anti-Semitism was created by the ADL.
I keep seeing this meme on Twitter about Trotsky being the one that created the terms racism.
I believe that is the truth. If I'm not mistaken, Trotsky, being an American Jew and one of the people behind the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, funded by the Rockefellers, who helped facilitate his travel to Russia. So the war now proposed is for the purpose of establishing Jewish homogeny throughout the world. Brigadier General George Van Horn Mosley in the New York Tribune, March 29th, 1939. I wish to confirm in the most explicit manner the declaration which I had and my colleagues made during the last months, and especially in the last week, that Jews stand by Great Britain and will fight on the side of the democracies. Our urgent desire is to give effect to these declarations. We wish to do so in an entirely consonant with the general schemes of the British action, and therefore would place ourselves in matters big and small under the coordinating direction of His Majesty's government. The Jewish Agency is ready to enter into immediate arrangements for utilizing Jewish manpower, technical ability, resources, etc. That's from Chaim Weissman, president of the World Jewish Congress, head of the Jewish Agency, and later president of Israel, in the London Times, September 5th, 1939, and in the London Jewish Chronicle on September 8th, 1939. The millions of Jews who live in America, England, and France, North and South Africa, and not to forget those in Palestine, are determined to bring the war of annihilation against Germany to its final end. That's from Blad Voor, Israelite in Netherlands, on September 13th, 1939. Stop talking about peace conditions, break Germany in pieces. The Daily Herald, number 7426 on the 9th of December, 1939. The Jews taken collectively view this war as a holy war. The Daily Herald, 1939, and quoted some other places. Even if we Jews are not physically at your side in the trenches, we are morally with you. This war is our war, and you fight it with us. Or they probably should have said for us. But in losing Germany, Jewry has lost a territory from which it exerted power. Therefore, it was determined to reconquer it. Louis Marshalko, The World Conquerors, the book, The World Conquerors, the Real War Criminals. The World Jewish Congress has been at war with Germany for 7 years. Rabbi Perlswig, head of the British section of the World Jewish Congress, spoke in the Toronto Evening Telegram. The Second World War is being fought for the defense of the fundamentals of Judaism. Rabbi Felix Mendelssohn, who's quite a famous Jew and has said some wild things over the years. I said that in the Chicago Sentinel in October 1942. We are not denying and we are not afraid to confess that this war is our war. So that's interesting, right? We are not denying and are not afraid to confess that this war is our war and that is waged for the liberation of Jewry. Stronger than all fronts together is our front, that of Jewry. We are not only giving this war our financial support on which the entire war production is based, we are not only providing our full propaganda power, which is the moral energy that keeps this war going. The guarantee of victory is predominantly based on weakening the enemy forces, on destroying them in their own country within the resistance. And we are the Trojan horse in the enemy's fortress. Thousands of Jews living in Europe constitute the principal factor in the destruction of our enemy. There, our front is a fact and the most valuable aid for victory. Chaim Weissman, again, president of the World Jewish Congress, head of the Jewish Agency, and later president of Israel.
They
Wait,
really speak like this all the fucking time.
yeah, nothing's changed. It's the same approach, same outlook. At times they're more outward about it. Other times um, they keep the narrative subtle, and they speak in a manner which won't agitate the population of the countries in which they reside, but um, often, especially when speaking in their amongst their own people, giving speeches, they're very forward. That's what they say. Often they're speaking in Hebrew, so it's not easily um, brought to the attention of others unless translated by a Jew. So that's another manner in which which they hide and change the manner in which these speeches are heard at various times. Played golf with Joe Kennedy, uh, U.S. ambassador to Britain. He says that Chamberlain stated that America and world Jewry forced England into World War II. That's a quote from James Forrestal, Secretary of the Navy, later Secretary of Defense, in his diary in a December 27th, 1945 entry. It is untrue that I or anyone else in Germany wanted war in 1939. It was wanted and provoked solely by international statesmen, either of Jewish origin or working for Jewish interests. Nor had I ever wished that after the appalling First World War, there would ever be a second against either England or America. And that was stated by Adolf Hitler in April 1945. So there was an article that I had read on the American Free Press by a Michael Collins Piper, and he gives a bit of a counter argument to some of the ideas that I've come to lean towards, and he states that there were no Jewish bankers behind Hitler. Rothschilds, Bushes, and Rockefellers weren't involved together or independently or by proxy. And we'll just go over his view of things. Again, I want to give the opportunity to present both sides of the coin, although I will lean a little bit heavier into the data which contradicts this man's stance. So, as stated, there's a variety of claims that the Bush family, Rockefellers, Rothschild families, and a host of Jewish bankers together or independently helped finance Hitler's rise to power. Most cited as a source for the story that Jewish bankers paved the way for Hitler. And he claimed in the book Hitler's Secret Backers, supposedly by a Jewish banker named Sidney Warburg. He states that there is no Sidney Warburg, first of all. And those who actually read the book, and most haven't, he states, will find this unknown author says, in contrast to what people think he said, that Jewish bankers didn't finance Hitler. Instead, the book claims that some naughty non-Jewish bankers did so. But even that isn't true, he goes on to say. An accurate assessment by James Poole in Who Financed Hitler, he states, absolutely refutes the legend that big banking and industrial interests played a substantial role in funding Hitler. Most of the Nazi Party's money came from small contributions and sales of literature. No Rothschilds backed Hitler. It's a myth. One banker practicing Christian and one-quarter Jewish descent was said by one source passing on a rumor to have donated money to Hitler. And that's it. Claims one Jewish banker known to have given money to any Nazis gave it to elements in the Nazi Party, the Strasser brothers who were trying to stop Hitler. And Hitler wasn't descended from any Rothschilds or Frankenbergers. And if he had any Jewish blood, it's never been authoritatively traced. One prominent claim that Hitler was Jewish cites Bridget Hammond's Hitler's Vienna as proof, pointing out the book describes stories of Hitler's Jewish heritage. Hammond dissects legends, refuting them in detail. Scholars such as Carolyn Yeager and Veronica Clark and Werewolves of the Iron Cross have also demolished these rumors, he states. Some claim Hitler was pro-Zionist. He says they're wrong. For a brief period, Hitler did encourage some Zionists in efforts to promote Jewish immigration to Palestine, as described in Edwin Black's The Transfer Agreement. This refers to the Havara Agreement. As we know, Hitler sent 60,000 Jews to Palestine with their belongings and coin after they were allowed to leave if they paid a small tax. Um,
That's kind of like California.
it's it's one of those things that I lean towards when stating that Hitler didn't exactly do much to exterminate the Jews, considering the 271,000 Jews that died in concentration camps died of typhus and starvation, and it's nowhere close to 6 million. And we'll get into some other details further to.
From what I heard was that he originally didn't plan on killing them and they were kind of hostages and like kind of like a more extreme version of Counter-Strike that you don't come into my area and I won't kill these people. Um it was some book that what's that guy? Uh he goes by the pen name Mencius Moldbug. Uh God damn it, he's fuck. But he was like he was on Dave Smith's show one time. It was some book like Into the Fire or something. And like it was basically proclaiming that he didn't really have like the intentions of killing them. I just lost you on Zoom. Oh, there you
Oh,
are.
I had just cut my video for a
Oh,
second. I was
okay.
taking care of something. Yeah, I will present some information um a little bit later on, but I don't want to get too bogged down in that part of the discussion right now because there's a lot of data to go through here. Um, Others are hysterical over the fact that American banks and corporations worked with the Nazi regime. Um, this man states that despite this frenzy, this is neither a major revelation nor is it extraordinary. Um, I would state that that's um, not necessarily the case because this was going on for some time and even continued during the war. There's a book written by Anthony Sutton, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, that Rockefeller Standard Oil helped fund Hitler. Um, but he uses a small quote: Standard Oil apparently did not finance Hitler's ascension to power. So he kind of cherry picked that. And then he'll say others will cite in another book, or sorry, for some of the same book as evidence that the Bush family, along with the Harriman's banking interests, funded Hitler. He states that Sutton says only that the Harrimans, like many American financial groups, had connections to corporate interests in Germany, and he concludes that this does not suggest that the Harrimans directly financed Hitler. Again, cherry picking a particular sentence in the book. And he doesn't mention the Bushes, but I will when we get into the details and meat of this. Um, he states that another rumor claims that the Bushes were part of a fascist plot to overthrow Franklin Roosevelt, citing Jules Archer's The Plot to Seize the White House, where there was a scheme to dislodge FDR, um, which he claims many patriots believe would have been a good thing. The book never mentions the Bushes, nor is there any evidence that they had anything to do with that plot. So I'm going to be citing the book um, Hitler's Rise to Power by, I believe it was James Poole, I'm not mistaken. Not to be mistaken with Tim Pool.
Very different.
Very, very different. But long story short, chapter one breaks down and is titled A Mysterious Beginning. It covers Hitler's early political activity in Munich. It was supported by small donations from nationalist sympathizers. He gained traction through the German Workers' Party, later renamed the Nazi Party. Early funding came from army officers and conservative elites who saw him as a bulwark against communism. Chapter two is labeled Billions. The Nazi Party's operations, rallies, propaganda, paramilitary units um, required vast sums, as we know. Pool details how Hitler's charisma attracted wealthy donors who saw him as a stabilizing force. The uh, the essay, the Strummeld Blittlung, and later the SS, the Schutzstaffel, were expensive to maintain, requiring continuous financial support. We'll get into some of that. Uh, Henry Ford and Hitler, the American industrialist, is shown to have indirectly supported Hitler through his publication, The International Jew, and they had ideological alignments. The book was widely circulated through Germany and admired by Hitler, though some say though direct financial links are debated. I won't get into that. Um, Ford's influence on Nazi ideology was significant, according to Poole. If I'm not mistaken, is said that Hitler had a picture of Henry Ford, like framed in his office.
Wasn't there
Um,
something off about Ford? Didn't he do something that was like a little counterintuitive to him writing that book?
I I didn't dive deep into Ford on this one, but I know that at one point he was sued by the Dodge brothers because he wanted to give a raise to his workers with the profits that were incurred over the year after the success of the Model T.
Yeah, I saw that, but there was
And
something that he did that was like kind of almost like supporting Jews. There was something that he did, I thought. I'm trying to remember.
well, that would be worth looking up if you want to just try and draw on that while I just get into just a few more of these details in this book because I'm not going to be going over everything in the book in great detail, but there is a couple chapters or one chapter in particular I wanted to discuss, and I found supplemental data to dive into it further. What did big business want? Chapter five, industrialists feared communism and labor unrest. They saw Hitler as a tool to suppress unions, stabilize the economy, and restore national pride. Many donors were motivated by self-interest, tax breaks, rearmament contracts, and protection from socialist policies. You get into the Depression, the Great Depression of 1929, devastated Germany's economy, creating fertile ground for extremist politics. Hitler promised an economic revival and a national resurgence, appealed to both the masses and the elite. Donation surge as business leaders sought to preserve capitalism. And then there's Hitler's foreign financiers, and Poole explores alleged support from foreign banks and businessmen. Some financiers in Britain and the U.S. Viewed Hitler as a counterweight to Bolshevism. Um,
Huh.
Debatable.
I think
Go-
I
d-
I think Slav is right. I think that might be what I was thinking was that Ford helped with Rockefeller to do the Prussian model for the schooling system. He was also a Mason, a Freemason, in the Scottish Rite, and we know that like the Scots think that they're like the real Jews. As far
Well,
as
the Scottish Rite is the highest order of Freemasonry, in terms of just strictly Freemasonry. But yeah, it's one of those things. Whenever Masons are involved, I'm always apprehensive as to what their true motivations are, and as we know, as discussed in a previous episode, Masons uh, revere Lucifer. He is the architect. He is the individual at the head of their particular school of thought. So
I
just
think
to disc,
I think that
no,
tie
go ahead.
though is with the Rockefellers Foundation. I think I think there's something in that if I were to dive deeper into there, but like where it was like counterintuitive to all of the anti-Jew stuff that he wrote, his association with Rockefeller, there was something in there worth exploring. But I'll let you keep going.
I want to say if you want to just go on and talk about that a little bit, I do need to I got to take a quick like
Okay.
20-second break, a short moment.
Yeah, okay, so the Ford Foundation works with visionary. No, that's a old one. That's new. But there was something on here. I know that I was just reading it recently about how he was working, I think, with the Rockefellers, and if Ford was a Freemason, then that would explain, since I believe that Scottish Rite, they believe that they're the true Jews, and the Rockefeller Foundation, they were definitely involved with Jewish ties. Hold on, Jewish Rockefeller Jewish ties. Rockefeller family and their associated foundations had significant, albeit complex, ties to Jewish communities and causes, including supporting Jewish scholars during the rise of Nazism, funding philanthropic efforts for Jewish welfare, and controversially backing German research that contributed to. Okay, so they were on both sides, obviously playing both sides of it. Um, and Rockefeller Foundation's funding of German eugenics research. So, yeah, they were on both sides. In the face, Rockefeller created programs to help relocate European intellectuals, many of whom were Jewish, thus saving their lives and careers. John D. Rockefeller Jr. personally donated to the United Jewish Appeal, contributing to Jewish philanthropic efforts. Let's see. The Rockefeller Brothers Fund has provided grants for justice, peace, and well, that's for um, something more timely now. So, oh wait, Rockefeller Foundation funded research at German institutes, including Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Okay, what I found was that when you were gone, there was the Rockefellers kind of supported both sides, and during the rise of the Nazis, they funded efforts for Jewish welfare, like relocation. But then they also uh, supported like German eugenics programs, which, I mean, if you study anything that the Jews seem to believe, they're very into eugenics.
They're very into eugenics, correct?
So, but I'll let you continue.
And that gets into just a slight non sequitur, IG Farben and pharmaceuticals being a major part of what they were doing as a chemical company, and some of the funding that they had received um, came from some of these bankers that we'll be discussing. And these practices went on to be utilized in the United States with with MK Ultra and the use of SSRIs, and the fact that a lot of these peoples that are involved in these mass shootings are doped up on pharmaceuticals. Uh, you know, Operation Paperclip, where we brought a bunch of Jews, Nazis over after the war. Um, it it is fair to say, in my opinion, uh, that the United States, people at the highest levels in the United States, the people who are working on behalf of the international bankers and the Jews, um, and the Nazi Party were in cahoots. But we'll get into some of those details.
Fuck, there was something that you just said that I was gonna touch on. Um,
Go ahead.
I don't remember.
It was
Fuck.
IG Farben and the
Oh.
pharmaceuticals.
So like the remember how I had called in to Low Value Mail, and also I've been talking about this recently, where like the switch from industrial capitalism to financial capitalism, that's directly involved, starting from the uh, and actually this chapter 5 where you're saying what did big business want, industrialists feared communism and labor unrest. So like the industrial capitalism, that was basically uh empires or countries reinvesting their money into social programs, but also reinvesting it into their own production means. And so that's what set Germany ahead, is because instead of being part of this finance capitalism that arose in the early 1900s, they had started to go and want one because of that whole alchemy thing, and then pursuing that chemistry and science background, um, they were able to go and start up a lot of their own businesses, which also they had to put into social programs like education. And so that could be a very, very heavy tie into why Germany had to be stopped, is because they were reinvesting in their people and bringing this back. Because I was just talking about Rockefeller and Ford doing the Prussian school system, like Slav
Yeah.
was bringing up. That whole system was to go and basically make worker bees without reinvesting into education, just making you a drone. So it kind of all ties into that, and the switch. Like this was basically the final thing that they had to remove before they could turn everything into finance capitalism, which is uh, basically not really producing anything at home, and then funding projects and outsourcing materials from other countries and keeping them in debt through lending them money at interest rates that they had to go and use their own resources um, at home. Like these foreign countries have to use their own resources as capital for these developing nations, and keeping them constantly in debt. So it really does tie into exactly what was happening with Austria and Germany, trying to retake these banks and fund, like, it really is, in the sense of it, National Socialism, where they're kind of reinvesting into social programs and all of like um, the like I saw somebody make a meme talking about, there used to be a country that give you 25% off your taxes for every child that you had,
Mm,
you know.
right.
So it is crazy to think that after this, it was like the final like straw, the final thing that they had to get rid of before they could really like start up what we have currently today.
It also could be seen as a testing ground for the mechanisms that would eventually be introduced into the United States, where you you work you work for the state, everything you contribute is for the good of the state, but uh, eventually the people who are holding the power and receiving the benefits of this are not necessarily the worker, but the corporations which are at in position to receive the benefits. Corporations like IG Farben and Thyssen Steel, who benefited greatly from the work that was done by the German people. The German people were motivated to um, bring about change in Germany, and when you have a charismatic leader, uh, he did a great job rallying the people towards this goal of bringing about a better Germany. But to whose benefit is the question. I do lean towards the idea that it merely benefited the Rothschilds, the bankers who we will discuss were involved, and at the very end of what transpired, Israel was created, the German people lost. But to get into some of the financial backing that Hitler received, um, I'm going to discuss Montagu Norman in the Bank of England. As we know, the Bank of England is essentially a Rothschild institution. Um, as we've discussed in the previous episode, the Bank of England is essentially the Rothschild Bank. Uh, Montagu Norman was the governor of the Bank of England. His tenure was from 1920 to 1944. He had a close ally in Hjalmar Schacht, Schacht, president of the Reichsbank. Okay? And Norman facilitated gold transfers, credit arrangements that stabilized Germany's post-Versailles Agreement economy. And he outwardly had an anti-communist stance. Um, that's again debatable. I'm sure that for the man to be in that position of power, you are not elected governor of the Bank of England without um, the approval of the Rothschilds. You're not going to be in that role. Um, Poole states here that his anti-communist stance made him sympathetic to any force opposing Bolshevism, even if that it meant tolerating the Nazis. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. There's a notable event in 1931. Norman approved a $25 million loan to Germany, coordinated with Hjalmar Schacht, which indirectly strengthened the financial credibility of the Nazi-aligned Reichsbank. And then we got to discuss Hjalmar Schacht. He was the Reichsbank president. His tenure was from 1923 to 1930, and then he was reappointed in 1933 after Hitler rose to power. He was the architect of Germany's financial recovery and a key liaison with foreign banks. His connection to Hitler, um, although not a Nazi initially, Schott later became the Minister of Economics under Hitler. was instrumental in the rearmament financing. So we're going to now discuss some American influences a bit. After World War One and the Treaty of Versailles, 1919, it had imposed crushing reparations on the German people in Germany. It initially was set at 132 billion gold marks. And for anyone interested, that's 33 billion US dollars at the time. That's a fun number, no? 33 popping up like that. Germany's economy collapsed under the weight of hyperinflation, political instability, and social unrest. The Allies, particularly France and Britain, demanded payment while Germany teetered on the brink of revolution. Uh, Enter the Americans, and, with plans not just to stabilize Germany, but to protect European markets and contain communism. So Wall Street and US banking comes up with the Dawes Plan and the Young Plan. The Dawes Plan occurred in 1924, and it was engineered by Charles G. Dawes, and it restructured the German reparations and injected American capital into Germany. Purpose was to restructure Germany's reparations and stabilize the economy, to restore international confidence in Germany's financial system. And it was Charles G. Dawes, who was Dawes, pardon me, the architect, who was an American banker and later vice president under Calvin Coolidge. So it was drafted by an international committee, which was chaired by Dawes. So the reparations were reduced to a manageable annual payment, starting at 1 billion gold marks, increasing to 2.5 billion over 5 years. Foreign loans to Germany totaling 800 million gold marks, mostly from Wall Street banks, about 200 million US dollars. Reichsbank restructured under Allied supervision to ensure transparency. There was evacuation of the Ruhr Valley. France agreed to withdraw troops, which it had occupied in 1923 to enforce reparations. Some of the financial involvement, and we'll discuss this further, came from J.P. Morgan and Co., which led the syndicate of American banks underwriting German bonds. National City Bank, Chase National Bank, and others participated, and funds began to flow into German industry, infrastructure, and government operations. So the impact of this Dawes plan was that it stabilized the Reichsmark and ended the hyperinflation. And it sparked a brief economic boom in Germany called, it's known as the Golden Twenties, and it gave Germany access to global capital markets. But it created dependency on short-term foreign loans, especially from the US. And then we'll see.
Holy shit, that's crazy because I was just looking at Calvin Coolidge, and you know what he's known for?
No, what is he known for?
The Roaring Twenties in America. And then you just said that that guy was his vice president.
Correct.
That's pretty crazy.
With that said, it it is fair to say that both countries saw economic booms during these periods, um, and then a financial collapse, which was orchestrated by Wall Street, as we all know. in 1929 on uh, Black Tuesday, October 24th. Funny enough, my birthday. Um, so just to continue a little bit, there we later see the Young Plan, 1929, and it further reduced the reparations and extended U.S. Financial influence. So again, expanding U.S. financial influence. Some of the key banks involved again, J.P. Morgan and Co., um, Chase National Bank, and National City Bank. So the Young Plans, its purpose was to replace the Dawes Plan with a more permanent reparation structure and to reduce Germany's reparations burden and to extend the payment terms. The architect was Owen D. Young, founder of RCA and advisor to President Hoover. He headed another international committee to revise reparations. So this is, round two, a restructuring. So the reparations were reduced to 112 billion gold marks, payable over 59 years until 1988. The annual payments were capped at 2 billion gold marks, but we also had the creation of the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland to manage the payments. And there are many people who believe that the Bank of International Settlements is kind of the head of the banking snake. It's the place from which um, all banks more or less take their orders from. There are people who would say, "Oh, it's the World Bank, it's the IMF, it's the Federal Reserve here in the United States," but there are people who state that it's the Bank of International Settlements that um,
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. What they're known for is international settlement. So they're the ones that give you collateral for loans for basically exactly what they were just doing with I'll give you the money now with a series of credit lines and then make you a credit slave or debt slave by like you offer up your land resources.
and
uh
your labor
yeah.
and your people, work to the bone for the for the fewer, and all the while they're collecting and making money on the front end, the back end, the interest. They're invested in the companies, pulling in money from the actual corporations themselves. And we're going to get into some of these corporations, particularly Thyssen Steel, headed by Fritz Thyssen. So,
I'm gonna grab a vitamin water. I'll be back in a
no,
second.
please, I'll just continue. The U.S. financial role continues with American banks underwriting German bonds. Wall Street remained the primary source of Germany's foreign capital. The Young Plan was seen as a diplomatic victory for Germany, but it came just before the Great Depression. Um, the impact was a short-lived success after the crash of the 1929 stock market, which not only triggered crises in the United States, it triggered a global financial crisis. U.S. loans dried up, Germany's economy collapsed again, and political extremism surged, setting the stage for Hitler's rise. So again, a manufactured collapse set the stage for uh, for Hitler to be poised to make the rounds, start giving his his speeches, and present himself as the man who would save the German people. So,
If only they kept like all their documents in like a building and then like kept it next to like some really tall buildings that happen to not really fall on it, but you know, it just
yeah.
decides it wants to join the party and fall down, and all the documents disappear and they could lose all their ties to all their debt.
Well, when you see a party going on next door, everyone wants to join the party. So, I mean, they couldn't help themselves, right? Building, what was it? S- Seven just
Yeah.
happened to,
Pull it.
pull it, pull it. Yeah, good stuff. So, with that said, some people will say Henry Ford had a little bit of backing. He did what he did. Um, as you discussed, Rockefeller and Ford and their um, working together uh, to implement the Rockefeller system that was found in the Prussian school systems. Um, Ford did eventually receive the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest Nazi honor for foreigners, which is interesting. And industrial support and foreign investments from the United States and Great Britain continued throughout the 20s and into the early 1930s. Thyssen, who we'll be discussing, Thyssen AG and Krupp Steel received foreign capital that was later used to produce arms and infrastructure for the Nazi regime, beg your pardon.
Oh, there you go. I'm sorry. Remember I was asking you about um Bush's ties, and I told you I was pretty sure it was the steel industry. Well, there you go.
Yeah, and Thyssen Steel, we're going to be getting into Bush actually. I have some very detailed information. I hope it's not a bit of a slog to listen to because it it's very involved and discusses many of the industry, the correspondences, the backing. Um, Bush. We're talking Prescott Bush and his father. So this is like four generations of Bush family ties to corruption and working on behalf of international Jewry, more or less. It's not just, Herbert Walker and the CIA, George Bush and 9/11, Prescott Bush and World War II, but his father, I think his name was Sam, had involvement as well, and we'll we'll cover that. So there, IG Farben was the chemical colossus behind the Reich. Um, I'm not going to begin to try and pronounce this name in German. Uh, if for fun, if you want, maybe you got a little bit better German pronunciation than I do. But
Oh, you're talking about the full name?
yeah, if you
Interest in Gemeinschaft Farming Industry,
there he
AG.
goes. There it is. So it was founded in 1925 as a merger of major German chemical firms, including BASF, which continues to operate here in the United States. Bayer, Horst, and others. It's headquartered in Frankfurt, in They were involved in chemicals, pharmaceuticals, synthetic fuels, and dyes. It was Germany's largest chemical company and one of the most powerful industrial entities in Europe. It was deeply integrated into Nazi economic planning, especially in rearmament and their plans for economic self-sufficiency. They played a central role by producing synthetic rubber, synthetic fuel, explosives and chemical weapons, and the pesticide known as Zyklon B, which was not used in gas chambers. So their relationship with the Nazi regime, Farben executives were early supporters of Hitler, donating to the Nazi Party in the early 1930s. After Hitler's rise to power in 1933, IG Farben became a state partner after receiving lucrative contracts and subsidies. If I'm not mistaken, Klaus Schwab's father worked for IG Farben and in quite an influential role. Could be wrong if that was the case, but I believe that's something I came across. The company built the Buna worker plant at Auschwitz III, known as Monowitz, and it used labor to produce some of the things that they were making there. Uh, their international ties, they had joint ventures, which they maintained with Standard Oil, New Jersey, which would go on to become Exxon, and DuPont, as we discussed in the previous episode regarding World War One and its financial backers when discussing Rockefeller and the beneficiaries of World War One. DuPont was a major recipient of Rockefeller funds. So again, a little bit of a Rockefeller um, connection there between IG Farben and their joint ventures. So these relationships helped IG Farben acquire patents and technology for synthetic fuel and rubber. And in 1930s, the corporation began to face scrutiny with their um, as a result of their relationships with American firms during some of the post-war investigations. So just a little bit of discussion for what transpired after the war. Um, 24 IG Farben executives were tried at the Nuremberg trials. In the IG Farben case, charges included war crimes, slave labor, and plunder. Several were convicted, but those sentences were always light. Um, IG Farben was dissolved in 1952, but its successor companies, BASF, Bayer, and Hoist, remain global corporations to this day.
As you were, because I was interested in what you said about Klaus Schwab, and like I googled like Klaus Schwab, IG Farben, and then like there was all these articles that popped up as like results. Like, have you seen the debunked meme of Schwab father being tied to the Nazis and stuff like that? And every time, because I knew as long as I read just far along down into the article, that eventually it would get proven true because
Sure.
that's how it always works. Is
Right.
they bullshit you for about like just a couple scrolls, and then
Oh
if you
yeah.
can get to the bottom, it goes a fact check published by accredited German journalist DPA used denazification records to uncover that Eugen Schwab was a member of some National Socialist organizations, but that alone does not prove any relationship to German high command or a belief in Nazi ideology. It's like, just shut the fuck up. Just say it, dude. Come on.
It's great the levels that they go to attempt to hide these things, but the truth always comes out. They could try their darndest, but
It's that vampire thing. It's like, or the Satan has like his rules. Like he has to abide by certain rules, so he can kind of lie, but he has to tell the truth. But the way that like he says it is like a lie through omission. But he
right.
can't actually tell lies because it like breaks the game. And so like I knew every fucking time they always do it because otherwise they'll get sued by their own legal like chess game. Like
Well,
it
he
breaks the
say
rules.
no, you're right. You're like, but I think Satan can't lie. But the people who want to be absolved of the karma for doing so, they don't want to they don't want to lie, so they'll engage in subterfuge or misdirection, but eventually somewhere along the lines they do admit to it because then they say, "Oh, it's your fault now," because
Well, they can't go and break the rule because then they can't apply it to you. So,
sure,
because if they go and lie and say that he wasn't involved with the Nazis, then like that's like libel or whatever, or
sure.
like lying, and then they can't use that against you to say that, oh, like you were lying, so and then go and sue you later on. So
Eh, Yeah, they can't get you for libel because what you're saying is factual, and so they use things like Snopes or Wikipedia or other institutions to propagate the lie for them. But you'll rarely hear it from the horse's mouth. They'll usually skirt around the question or say things like that's preposterous, but
well,
they
the
don't
thing is, all of them were
necessarily address it.
saying, all of them were saying like debunked, uh, meme on internet, and then like, so they're not really lying in the title. They're just telling you, something is debunked,
Right.
and then most people, when they have to go and Google these things, are in some argument with some leftist retard family member that like you tell them to go Google something, and then 50 articles pop up with the same thing saying, "See, it's debunked," and then
I
without art like actually going into the article.
Right. You're 100% correct. And they're not actually doing the research or looking at both sides of the coin or digging deep enough. They merely scratch the surface and say, look, see, it's clearly not the case.
Yeah, I have 50 articles right here that say the exact same thing
Right.
without actually going into the article.
And
But
that's where we get into the 8200 and their role at Microsoft and Google and their job of scrubbing and steering the narrative so that when you do make that search on one of these particular sites, you only find data in the first, you know, 12, 15 articles or 2 pages that corroborate the idea that it's debunked. Yeah, you're spot on there.
it's wild that Google used to work, and then like nobody has any answer to like just like propagating what we used to have. I don't understand why nobody's done that. Like everything like Grok is just Google like again.
Yep.
It's just the same thing. It worked for 2 days before we had it working for about 7, 8 years, and you could actually find something on Google. Like,
Well, even Yandex took a turn for the worse. When I
oh
started doing
yeah,
this podcast with you, initially I was able to find quite a good bit of good bit of details and information and articles which substantiate the the particular manner in which I searched for something. And now, similarly to Google, I have to wade through sometimes pages before I can get to something that is reflective of the the search that I made, and not propaganda on behalf of the Jew. So
Oh,
it's un
fuck. You know what? I was just watching a video on a computer system invented in like the early 60s that was like still people use that they swear by it. I almost want to say it's called Cobalt, and like it was like a search directory, and it's like we keep chasing the same thing, but like you could put in terms and then people would edit it and add in like searchable terms, and it was like incredibly fast because that's like we're getting off a tangent, but like everything is like so muddied through all these search engines, and it's so weird that we have like more and more technology and ability to go and like power the search functions, but somehow it gets worse and worse. So, but like there
it's
is
the
something like that out there.
it's almost as if the Ministry of Information from 1984 has been hard at work for a very, very long time, eliminating any and all competition. If you're happy to be working on a startup um, that can utilize the internet in an efficient manner to draw upon um, IRLs and particular sites that will be reflective of the search in a true and honest manner, they're purchased. They're purchased by Google. They come in, they buy up the technology, and they shelf it, and it never sees the light of day. The Ministry of Information and what was taking place in 1984 is very much in full effect. And I mean, we're living it. It's the George Orwell would be rolling in his grave if he were to see the world that we live in now and what's down the pipeline with Palantir.
Would he though? Because wasn't he a socialist?
Nonetheless, he would have said, "Well, I told you so," but shit, I didn't think it would be this bad. It's maybe not. I don't know
It
enough about the man.
isn't it. Well, I'll let you get back on track, but isn't it funny how I called in and started harassing Howard Bloom about his early life, and then a week later, all these reports on Twitter are popping up about how like ADL wants to take down the early
Yeah.
life.
And I've noticed, like, when I was doing a search on someone we're going to be speaking about shortly, Avril Harriman, I wasn't able to find that information that was usually there on Wikipedia. Born into a Jewish family, that's it. It seems as though they're scrubbing that left and right, and you're no longer finding um, that particular passage, which was so common, just a couple years back, even less than a year ago, because they're aware that we do some research, we do some digging, and I was able to find information that substantiates that Mr. Harriman comes from a Jewish banking family.
It really is every time.
And it's every single time. It is. So to to jump back into it, we got Thyssen, the steel empire that forged the war machine, and its founder was August Thyssen, who was born in 1842 and died in 1926. But Fritz Thyssen, his son, was Hitler's earliest and most influential financial backer. And again, we're going to see that Fritz Thyssen had ties to Harriman and Bush's. So the company's official name, Varengit Stahlwerk AG, also known as United Steelworks, formed in 1926 as a merger of Thyssen's Holdings and other steel firms. Their industry was steel, coal, iron, and armaments. The financial support that was provided to Hitler began in 1923, and he was impressed by his anti-communist rhetoric and his nationalist vision. Poole covers in the book. He donated hundreds of thousands of Reichsmarks to the Nazi Party, helping fund propaganda campaigns, paramilitary operations, and election efforts in the late 1920s and early 1930s. His political influence was instrumental in organizing the 1932 meeting of industrialists with Hitler, which helped secure support of the elites of Germany. He lobbied President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as chancellor in January 1933. Initially saw Hitler as a tool to suppress communism and labor unrest. States. So he allegedly had a fallout with Hitler and had a bit of a regret about what he had done. By 1938, Thyssen grew disillusioned with the Nazi brutality, especially after the Kristallnacht. Again, this is Poole's interpretation of things. He was
But that also, Kristallnacht was Gestapo, right? Brown shirts.
Night of Broken Glass, where they
Yeah,
went
but I'm
about.
saying that was because that was done by the Gestapo, which was like the kind of thug um, group of the
The
Nazi,
secret police, yeah.
and they were like basically made up of ne'er do wells and a lot of pedophiles, like
N-
the leader of the brown shirts or
and
Gestapo.
homosexuals, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
Yeah, it was all the people that weren't fit to be in the SS.
So he fled Germany in 1939 and got arrested by the Gestapo, as I said. But he ends up getting imprisoned in concentration camps or the Polish summer camps, as my friend Slav so beautifully coined one day on Low Value Mail. I've come to appreciate that and use that now. Thank you, Slav. Um, After the war, he published "I Paid Hitler" in 1941, uh, a memoir detailing his financial support and subsequent regret. Again, I'm not sure about the regret on his end. Um, we're going to talk quite a bit more about Thyssen, uh, particularly his involvement with some of the uh, bankers in the United States. And with that said, I wanted to talk about Union Banking Corporation and Thyssen's financial interests, which were tied to Union Banking Corporation. Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George Bush, was the director of the United Banking Corporation. And in 1942, Under the Trading with the Enemy Act, the United States government seized UBC's assets, citing its role in financing Nazi Germany. But we're going to go into great detail about Bush, UBC, Harriman, and their joint interests in helping fund the German war machine and Hitler in particular. So, the Union Banking Corporation was established formally in 1924 as a unit in the Manhattan offices of W.A. Harriman and Co. Again, that's where we first see um, their relationship to Harriman. And interlocking with the Thyssen-owned Bank of Voorhandel and Scheepvaart, which was also known as BHS in the Netherlands. Um, the investigators concluded that the Union Banking Corporation has, since its inception, handled funds chiefly supplied to it through the Dutch bank by the Thyssen's interests for American investment, and then by a personal agreement between Averell Harriman and Fritz Thyssen in 1922. W.A. Harriman and Co. would be transferring funds back and forth between New York and the Thyssen interests in Germany. By putting up around $400,000, the Harriman organization would be joint owner and manager of Thyssen's banking operations outside of Germany. So the question is asked, how important was the Nazi enterprise for which President Bush's father, um, like how important was this Nazi enterprise to this New York banker, Prescott Bush? So in 1942, the U.S. government investigative report said that Bush's Nazi front bank was an interlocking concern with United Steelworks Corporation, also known as German Steel Trust, led by Fritz Thyssen and his two brothers. After the war, congressional investigators probed the Thyssen interests by Union Banking Corp and its related Nazi affiliations, and the investigation showed that Verniget Stahlwerk had produced the following approximate proportions of the total German national output. So this steel conglomerate was pumping out 50% of Nazi Germany's pig iron, 41% of Nazi Germany's universal plate, 36% of Nazi Germany's heavy plate, 38.5% of Nazi Germany's galvanized steel, 45% of Nazi Germany's pipes and tubes, 22% of Nazi Germany's wire, 35% of Nazi Germany's explosives. So this accounts for, a healthy proportion of Nazi Germany's submarines, bombs, rifles, etc. Um, Prescott Bush became the vice president of W.A. Harriman and Co. in 1926. That same year, a friend of Harriman and Bush set up a giant new organization for their client, Fritz Thyssen. As we discussed, the prime sponsor of Adolf Hitler. It was known as the New German Steel Trust, or German Steel Trust. And it became Germany's largest industrial corporation when it was organized in 1926, with the help of Wall Street banker Clarence Dillon. Dillon was the old comrade of Prescott Bush's father, Sam Bush. And They had relations from Merchants of Death Bureau in World War One. I'm not sure what the Merchants of Death is, but in return for putting up the 70 million to create his organization, the majority owner Thyssen gave the Dillon Reed Company two or more representatives on the board for the new steel trust. And he gets into the discussion of the division of labor. You know, Thyssen's own confidential accounts for political and related purposes were run through the Walker Bush organization, the German Steel Trust, which did its corporate banking through Dillon Reed. The Walker Bush firm's financial banking activities were not just politically neutral money making ventures, um, which happened to coincide with the aim of the German Nazis. Um, all the firm's European business in those days was organized around anti democratic political forces. So we had mentioned Harriman and Co. or W.A. Harriman. So that stands for William Averill Harriman. And I'm just gonna briefly give the Wikipedia version of the man's backing or background, I beg your pardon. And Wikipedia didn't have the Jewish family part, but I inserted that in after being able to locate that particular information. So he was born in November 15th, 1891, lived to 1986, and he was an American politician, businessman, and diplomat. He comes from a Jewish family of financiers and entrepreneurs. I believe his father worked for Union Railroad, if I'm not mistaken. And he was a founder of Harriman and Co., which merged with the older Brown Brothers to form Brown Brothers Harriman and Co., an investment bank. And he served as the Secretary of Commerce under President Truman, and it was the 48th governor of New York. He sought the Democratic Party nomination for president in 1952 and 56, but was unsuccessful. Throughout his career, he was a key foreign policy advisor to Democratic presidents. He was born to a wealthy family, the son of railroad baron E.H. Harriman, while attending the the Groton School and Yale University. He made contacts that led to the creation of a banking firm that eventually merged into Brown Brothers Harriman and Co. He owned parts of various other companies, including Union Pacific Railroad, um, the Merchant Shipping Corporation, and Polaroid, the film distributor. So during the presidency of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harriman served as the National Recovery, pardon me, in the National Recovery Administration and on the Business Advisory Council before moving into foreign policy roles. And after helping coordinate the Lend-Lease program, Harriman served as Roosevelt's personal envoy to the United Kingdom and then as ambassador to the Soviet Union. Isn't that interesting? And he attended the major World War II conferences that transpired after the war. He became a prominent advocate of George F. Kennan's policy of containment. Also served in the Secretary of Commerce and coordinated the implementation of the Marshall Plan. In 1954, Harriman defeated Republican Senator Irving Ives to become the governor of New York. He served a single term before his defeat by Nelson Rockefeller. And Harriman unsuccessfully sought the president nomination in 1952 at the Democratic National Convention in 1956 as well. And although he had Truman's backing at the 1956 convention, the Democrats nominated Adlai Stevenson II in both elections. After his defeat, he became widely respected foreign policy elder with the Democratic Party. He helped negotiate the partial nuclear test ban treaty during the presidency of John F. Kennedy. He was deeply involved in the Vietnam War during Lyndon B. Johnson's administration. After Johnson left office in 69, Harriman became affiliated with various organizations, including the Club of Rome and the Council on Foreign Relations. And I
That
don't know what,
that's crazy that he was involved. He helped negotiate the partial nuclear test ban treaty. So
and
that's what got Kennedy killed.
yeah, so I don't know where it was removed or why it was removed when I tried doing a copy and paste on this, but it's also stated that he attended Yale and was a member of Skull and Bones.
Yeah, Yale. I was looking at that where like Yale is it just produces a lot of scum.
Yeah, sure does. And as we know, George Bush attended Yale, his father attended Yale, and are also Skull and Bones. So, yeah, with that said, that covers a bit of what's discussed in chapter 7, but in chapter 8 and 9, it's not necessarily relevant to this conversation. In my opinion, it's just something to gloss over. Chapter 8's big business's attempt to stop Hitler as Hitler grew to power. Some industrialists tried to rein him in. Their efforts failed due to his growing popularity and ruthless tactics. Once in power, Hitler sidelined many of his early backers or forced them back into compliance. Chapter 9, bribes and blackmail. Hitler used intimidation, blackmail, and political leverage to extract funds. Wealthy individuals were coerced into donating or faced threats to their businesses. The Nazi Party's fundraising became increasingly aggressive and opaque. So, this leads us to Hitler's ladder to power, which he climbed. And, officially, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany on January 30th, 1933, an absolute dictator in March 1933, after 2 years of expensive and violent lobbying and electioneering, according to this individual. Two affiliates of the Bush Harriman organization played great parts in the undertaking. As we discussed, Thyssen and his German Steel Trust, and the Hamburg America line, and several of its executives. And then we're going to dive in a little bit closer into these these individuals that were in close relation to the Bush family, and they had their partnership, as we discussed. Fritz Thyssen, um, of Thyssen Steel, told Allied interrogators after the war about some of his financial support for the Nazi Party in 1930 or 31. He told Hess, I would arrange credit for him with a Dutch bank in Rotterdam. That's BHS, the bank with the internet interesting name from the Netherlands, um, which was a Harriman Bush affiliate, and he arranged the credit, and Hitler would pay it back in 3 years. He chose a Dutch bank because he did not want to get mixed up with the German banks in the position that he was in, he stated. And because I thought it was better to do business with a Dutch bank, I thought I would not have the Nazis do a little more than hold my hands. The credit was 250 to 300,000 gold marks, about the sum I had given before. The loan was to be repaid to the Dutch bank, but I think some of the money is still owing on it. The overall total of Thyssen's political donations and loans to the Nazis was well over $1 million, including funds he raised from others uh, in a period of money shortage in Germany. And we have Frederick Flick. Frederick Flick was a major co-owner of the German Steel Trust with Fritz Thyssen, and it was Thyssen's longtime collaborator, and they were on occasion competitors in the public eye, but I believe that wasn't necessarily the case in truth. In preparation for the war crimes tribunal being held in Nuremberg, the U.S. government said that Flick was one of the leading financiers of the industrialists who from 1932 contributed large sums to the Nazi Party, a member of the Circle of Friends of Himmler, who contributed large sums to the SS. Flick, like Thyssen, financed the Nazis to maintain their private armies. The Flick-Harriman partnership was directly supervised by Prescott Bush and by George Walker, President Bush's grandfather. And that's why we have George Bush being named Herbert Walker Bush, his father. He gets that named after George Walker there, and then the grandson or the last Bush we have is George Walker. I mean George H.W. So the Harriman Walker Union Banking Corporation arrangements for the German Steel Trust, which was made by Flick and his vast operations in Germany by no later than 1926. So the Harriman 15 Corporation is interesting. It consisted of George Walker as president, Prescott Bush and Averell Harriman as sole directors. And they had a substantial stake in the Celestian Holding Company at the time of the merger with Brown Brothers. In January the 1st of 1931, this holding correlated to Averell Harriman's chairmanship of the Consolidated Celestian Steel Corporation. The American group owing 1/3 of the complex steelmaking, coal mining, and zinc mining activities in Germany and Poland, in which Frederick Flick owned 2/3. For this buildup of the Hitler war machine with coal, steel, and arms production using labor of the German people and some labor that occurred in the camps. Again, debatable. The Nazi Flick was condemned to 7 years in prison at the Nuremberg trials, but he only served 3. And he had friends in New York and London. Surprise, surprise. And he lived well into the 1970s and died a billionaire. So not much of not much for repercussions for what it is he participated in, considering the degree to which he helped finance the war effort.
Well, that
So
answers my questions also when I brought up from the start of this was the Bush family with the steel using labor. So that's where that slave labor thing comes from.
Sure. On the 19th of March, 1934, Prescott Bush, then director of the German Steel Trust Union Banking Corporation, as we've discussed, initiated an alert to Averell Harriman about a problem which had developed in the Flick partnership. Bush sent Harriman a clipping from the New York Times of that day, which reported that the Polish government was fighting back against the American and German stockholders who controlled Poland's largest industrial unit, the Upper Silesian Coal and Steel Company, not to be confused with the Consolidated Silesian Steel Company, but either a subsidy or an arm of the corporation, which was operating in Poland. And the Times article continued that the company has long been accused of mismanagement, excessive borrowing, fictitious bookkeeping, and gambling insecurities. And warrants were issued in December for several directors accused of tax evasion. They were German citizens, so they just fled. They were replaced by Poles. Airflick, regarding this as an attempt to make the company's board entirely Polish, retaliated by restricting credits until the new Polish directors were um, unable to pay the workmen regularly. And the Times noted that the company's mines and mills employ 25,000 men and account for about 45% of Poland's total steel output and 12% of her coal production. Two-thirds of the company's stock was owned by Frederick Flick, um, as we discussed, a leading German steel industrialist, and that the remainder was owned by interests in the United States. So, in view of that fact, a great deal of the Polish output was being exported to Hitler's Germany, and the Polish government thought that Bush, Harriman, and their Nazi partners should at least pay full taxes on their Polish holdings. The U.S. and Nazi owners responded with a lockout. The letter to Harriman in Washington reported a cable from their European representative. Having undertaken new steps in London and Berlin, please establish friendly relations with Polish ambassador in Washington. 1935 Harriman 15 Corporation memo from George Walker announced an agreement had been made in Berlin to sell an 8,000 block of their shares in Consolidated Silesian Steel. But the dispute with Poland did not deter the Bush family from continuing its partnership with Flick. Um,
Wait,
Nazi tanks.
wasn't now that I'm thinking about it, wasn't there like the Polish workers um like that in communism, like that was a big deal with the Polish workers and the um steel works. It had something to it really impacted the the rise of the Communist Party. Do you know
Oh, I
anything
wouldn't
about that?
know, but I wouldn't be surprised because when you consider um, the involvement of Flick and and Thyssen with Consolidated Silesian Steel and Upper Silesian Steel, I'm sure the unions that were formed in Poland uh, were in some capacity led by Jews and a part of the rise of communism in Poland, as we know, communism being a Jewish creation and institution.
Well, so like in that band that I was playing the other day on the punk thing, there's that band called the Redskins, and a lot of their songs and a lot of these communist punk bands sing a lot about the Polish workers in like these steel factories is a major thing that they sing about, and they're all like heavy socialist, heavy communist. So it's interesting to see that once that like once that separation was made, once the Nazis were gone, where that fell into and who fell into controlling that. So that's something I guess I should explore on my own. But it's just it just kind of hit me as you were bringing up the Polish steel works.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I'm sure with that void of German influence, Poles, I'm sure, began to occupy those positions. Were these Poles Jews? Likely this is the case. There is a number of Poles who were Catholic, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Jews who took over the industry. And with that said, the despite the dispute with Poland and Upper Silesian Steel, the Bush family continued its partnership with Flick. Nazi tanks and bombs eventually settled this dispute in September 1939 with the invasion of Poland, beginning World War II. Interesting, they chose Poland. Um, the Nazi army had been equipped by Flick, Harriman, Walker, and Bush with materials that were manufactured, or some could say stolen from Poland. There were probably a few people who could appreciate the irony, including the Soviets, um, who, when they attacked and invaded Poland from the east, their vehicles were fueled by oil pumped from Baku wells, which were revived by the Harriman Walker Bush enterprise, which again shows that all sides of every war front is often funded by these same bankers. And in this particular discussion, we're focusing on um, Harriman, Bush, and uh, and Walker with their enterprises. So 3 years later, nearly a year after the Japanese attacks on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. government ordered a seizure of the Nazi share in the Silesian American Corporation. Under the Trading with the Enemy Act, enemy nationals were said to own 49% of the common stock and 41.67% of the preferred stock of the company. The order characterized the company as a business enterprise within the United States owned by a front company in Zurich, Switzerland, and held for the benefit of Bergwerkgesellschaft George von Geisch Erben, a German corporation. Burt Walker was still the senior director of the company, which he had founded back in 1926, simultaneously with the creation of German Steel Trust. Ray Morris, Prescott Bush's partner from the Union Banking Corporation, and the Brown brothers, and Harriman was also a director. The investigative report prior to the government crackdown explained the nature of business. The subject corporation is an American holding company for German and Polish subsidiaries, which own large and valuable coal and zinc mines in Silesia, Poland, and Germany. Since September 1939, these properties have been in the possession of and have been operated by the German government and have undoubtedly been of considerable assistance to that country in its war effort. The report noted that the American stockholders hoped to regain control of the European properties after the war. So, to get into a little bit of the control of Nazi commerce, Burt Walker had arranged credits, had arranged the credits which Harriman needed to take control of the Hamburg American line. Back in 1920, Walker had organized the American Ship and Commerce Corporation as a unit of W.A. Harriman and Co. with contractual power over Hamburg America's affairs. As the Hitler Project went into high gear, Harriman Bush shares in the American Ship and Commerce Corporation were held by the Harriman 15 Corporation, again run by Prescott Bush and Burt Walker. It was a convenient stroll for the well-tanned, athletic, handsome Prescott Bush. I forget what that's from. I think they're talking about him being on some ship. Um, so it was a convenient stroll from the Brown Brothers Harriman skyscraper at 59 Wall Street, where he was a senior managing partner, confidential investments manager, and advisor to Averill and his brother Bunny. He walked across the street. Oh, that's what this stroll was about. To the Harriman 15 Corporation at 1 Wall Street, otherwise known as G.H. Walker and Co. Then around the corner from his subsidy offices at 39 Broadway, former home of the old W.A. Harriman and Co., and still the offices for American Ship and Commerce, and the offices of the Union Banking Corporation, where Prescott Bush was director. In many ways, the Bush's Hamburg America line was the pivot for this particular Hitler project. Some say the entire Hitler project, and some of the funding he received, aside from Fritz and what transpired in Germany. This is kind of looking at it from the American perspective. Averell Harriman and Burt Walker had gained control over the steamship company in 1920 in negotiations with its post-World War I chief executive, Wilhelm Kuno. And with the line's bankers, M.M. Warburg, Max Warburg, as you and I have discussed in the previous episodes. Kuno was thereafter completely dependent on these Americans and became a member of the Anglo-German Friendship Society. In 1930, between 1932, a drive for a Hitler dictatorship developed, with Wilhelm Kuno contributing important sums to the Nazi Party. Albert Vogler was a chief executive uh, at Thyssen Flick German Steel Trust, which again, uh, Bush's Union Banking Corporation uh, at the New York office. He was director of the Bush affiliate BHS, that bank in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, which we had discussed. And he was also a director of the Harriman Bush Hamburg America line. Vogler joined Thyssen and Flick in their major contributions in between 1930 and 1933, and helped organize the final Nazi leap into national power. Um, the Schroeder family of bankers was a linchpin for the Nazi activities of Harriman and Prescott Bush, and closely tied to their lawyers Allen and John Foster Dulles. This is where we get into the Dulles brothers and some of their involvement in some of this. Baron Kurt von Schroeder was co-director of the massive Thyssen-Hute foundry, along with Johann Groninger, and Prescott Bush's New York bank partner. Von Schroeder was treasurer of the support organization for the Nazi Party's private armies, to which also Frederick Flick contributed. Von Schroeder and Montague Norman's protege, Hjalmar Schacht, who we discussed earlier, together made the final arrangements for Hitler to enter the government. Uh, Baron Rudolf von Schroeder was the vice president director of the Hamburg America line. Long and intimate contact of Averell Harriman in Germany. You know, he was working on behalf of the Harrimans in Germany. And Baron Rudolph sent his grandson, Baron Johann Rudolph, for a tour of Prescott Bush's Brown Brothers Harriman offices in New York City on December 1932, on the eve of Hitler's triumph. Certain actions taken by the Harriman-Bush shipping line in 1932 must be ranked among the greatest acts of treason in this century. Up there, but there's I would say the formation of the Federal Reserve probably takes the cake. The U.S. Embassy in Berlin reported back to Washington that the costly election campaigns and the cost of maintaining the private army of 300,000 to 400,000 men had raised questions as to the Nazis' financial backers. The constitutional government of the German Republic moved to defend national freedom by ordering the Nazi Party private armies disbanded. The U.S. Embassy reported that the Hamburg America line was purchasing and distributing propaganda attacks against the German government. Uh, and, because they had attempted last minute crackdown on Hitler's forces. Thousands of German opponents of Hitlerism were shot or intimidated privately by the brown shirts. In this connection, this article, which I've sourced some of this information, notes that um, the original Merchant of Death, Samuel Pryor, was a founding director of both Union Banking Corporation, which Prescott Bush was a director, and the American Ship and Commerce Corporation. Since Mr. Pryor was executive committee chairman of Remington Arms and a central figure in the world's private arms trafficking, he used the Hitler Project, uh, which was enhanced as the Bush's family partner in the Nazi Party banking and transatlantic shipping. Uh, the U.S. Senate arms traffic investigator probed Remington after it was joined in a cartel agreement on explosives with the Nazi firm IG Farben. So it had a relationship with IG Farben. And looking at that period leading up to Hitler's seizure of power, the senators found that German political associations like the Nazis and others are nearly all armed with American guns. Arms of all kinds coming from America are transshipped in the Scheldt, or yeah, Scheldt, to river barges before the vessels arrive in Antwerp. Oh, Antwerp, isn't that interesting?
Fuck, you know what?
Jews.
Oh,
We watched that video on cocaine trafficking in Antwerp.
no. I just thought about Remington. You know what Remington did? Remington is the one that just in the last 5 years was the one that got sued and then settled as a precedent for being
Culpable for
culpable
arms
for
sales.
mass shooters.
Yeah, yeah. Just like Alex Jones set precedent for citizens to be persecuted and held liable for stating that Sandy Hook was a false flag. There's always they have to create precedent, so they have these
That's
yeah,
crazy that
100%. So
these
they
guys were involved in that shit before.
yep. So
Wow. And what do they always do? What do governments always do? Take away the guns.
that's the goal. That's the goal.
Wow. That's crazy to fucking think about that. That's nuts. Wow.
Yeah, it if they get their way, they'll revoke the Second Amendment, or they've already made it, extremely difficult to obtain weapons of any true force, which could actually, with great resistance, you know, put enough bullets down the range if you have, 30 SWAT officers. If you don't have a a set of arms with, full auto or, 7.62 or 5.56. If you're not carrying heavy firepower, I mean, good luck penetrating armor. I mean, I don't know, but that's a slight digression. So, yeah, the idea was that the principal arms coming from America at the time were Thompson submachine guns and revolvers, and the number is great. It stated. So at the beginning of the Hitler regime, it brought some interesting changes to the Hamburg American line and some betrayals as well. Bush's Prescott Bush's American Ship and Commerce Corporation notified Max Warburg, brother of Paul Warburg of the Federal Reserve, and head of, I believe it's like Gesellschaft Bank and the Warburg Bank of Germany.
And those
He
are the
notified,
two brothers that funded opposite sides of World War One.
correct,
Okay.
correct. So Prescott Bush's American Ship and Commerce Corporation notified Max Warburg on March 7, 1933, that Warburg was to be the corporation's official designated representative on the board of Hamburg America. Max Warburg replied on the 27th, 1933, assuring his American sponsors that the Hitler government was good for Germany. And mind you, Max Warburg is a Jew. So that's very interesting for him to be stating that in 1933.
Yeah, that's just like I was saying earlier about the Zelensky advisor that was basically saying almost exactly the same words about how it was good for them to get in an altercation with Russia to join NATO.
Yeah. So Max Warburg replied on March 27th in 1933 um, on how exactly Hitler was good for the government of Germany, stating that for the last few years, business was considerably better than when we had anticipated. But a reaction is making itself felt for some months. We are actually suffering also under the very active propaganda against Germany caused by some unpleasant circumstances. These occurrences were the natural consequences of the very excited election campaign, but were extraordinarily exaggerated in the foreign press. The government is firmly resolved to maintain public peace and order in Germany, and I feel perfectly convinced in this respect that there is no cause for any alarm whatsoever. So, this seal of approval for Hitler coming from a famous Jew was, in my opinion, not just what Bush and Harriman required, um, because they anticipated serious alarm inside the United States against their their relationships with Nazi Germany. And on March 29th, 1933, 2 days after Max's letter to Harriman, Max's son, Eric Warburg, sent a cable to his cousin, Frederick Warburg, a director of the Harriman Railroad System, Union Pacific. And he asked Frederick to use all your influence to stop all anti Nazi activity in America, including atrocity news and unfriendly propaganda in the foreign press, mass meetings, etc. This is Jews telling other Jews to be quiet about these Nazis. They're good for what we're trying to do. You follow me?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how George Soros was the one that was like making money off of
Yeah.
selling out his own people.
Yep. Sorry, I had to remove my mask for a second. So Frederick cabled back to Eric No responsible groups here are urging a boycott of German goods, merely excited individuals. And this harks back on to the discussion we had earlier at the beginning of the pod. So, 2 days after that, on March the 31st, 1933, the American Jewish Committee, controlled by the Warburgs, and B'nai B'rith, Jewish Freemasonry, heavily influenced by the Sulzbergers, New York Times, issued a formal official joint statement of the two organizations, counseling that no American boycott against Germany be encouraged and advising that no further mass meetings be held or similar forms of agitation be employed. The American Jewish Committee and B'nai B'rith, the mother of the Anti-Defamation League, continued with this hardline, no attack on Hitler stance all throughout the 1930s. You know, they were trying to blunt the fight mounted by certain Jews and telling them, hush, this isn't what's best for the Jew. You follow me? Again, this leads credence to the stance that I've come to understand, that these people wanted the war to progress, eventually for Germany to lose, and for Jews all over Europe to feel attacked. Um, whether, in my opinion, these things didn't happen. Some would say that they did, but they wanted Jews to flee Europe to what would be the newly created state of Israel.
Well, yeah, I mean that's all clear through the Balfour Declaration.
Well, not just the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration set the stage, but the Jews of Europe didn't want to leave, so they needed a catalyst
Yeah,
to get them to leave. That being these big bad Nazis.
but that
But
kind of goes against your point. I mean, it kind of goes towards what I was saying is that I lean towards, and don't I don't idolize Hitler, and not saying that because like I'm fucking a faggy little leftist. I mean like just like I don't really have any skin in the game, but like it kind of going through what you're saying kind of shows that he was like uh a kind of a proxy or a stooge, and not so much like he might have thought that he was getting one over on them, and might have been getting like been able to go and pull it off in the end, thinking he was going to outsmart them, and
well, that
then
is
he was kind of the stooge all along.
that is debatable, and we will have that conversation shortly. I wanted to just kind of tie this up before we jump into that, but
Sure.
that is where this conversation is leading towards. So the Anti-Defamation League, uh, predecessor B'nai B'rith, and the American Jewish Committee had this stance throughout the 30s to not attack Hitler, and you could see this based on these correspondences between these Warburg cousins, son of Max and his particular cousin. So this interchange, which was discussed above, um, taking taking place entirely within the orbit of the Haribin Bush firm, may explain some of this relationship between George Bush to American Jewish and Zionist leaders. Some of them, in close cooperation with his family, um, states, played an ugly part in the drama of Nazism. Is this why professional Nazi hunters have never discovered how the Bush family made its money? You know, So the executive board of the Hamburg America line, HAPAG, HAPAG, met jointly with the North German Lloyd Company board in Hamburg on September 5th, 1933. Under official Nazi supervision, the two firms were merged. Prescott Bush's American Ship and Commerce Corporation installed Christian J. Beck, a longtime Harriman executive, as manager of the freight and operations in North America for the new joint Nazi shipping lines Hapag Lloyd on November the 4th, 1933. So again, a joint U.S. and Nazi corporation, um, which had Prescott Bush formerly at its head, but they ended up installing Christian J. Beck, a longtime Harriman executive. I didn't look into whether Beck was Jewish or not. So, according to testimony of officials of the companies before Congress in 1934, a supervisor from the Nazi Labor Front rode with every ship of the Harriman Bush line. Employees of the New York offices were directly organized into the Nazi Labor Front organization. Hamburg America provided free passage to individuals going abroad for Nazi propaganda purposes, and the line subsidized pro Nazi newspapers in the USA, as it had done in Germany, against the constitutional German government. In the mid portion of 1936, Prescott Bush's American Ship and Commerce Corporation cabled Max Warburg, asking Warburg to represent the company's heavy share interest at the forthcoming Hamburg America stockholders meeting, which took place. When the Warburg office replied with the information that we represented you at the stockholders meeting and exercised on behalf of your voting power for 3,509,600 Hapag stocks deposited with us. Um, the Warburgs transmitted a letter received from Emil Helfenreich, the German chief executive of both Hapag Lloyd and the Standard Oil subsidiary in Nazi Germany. It is the intention to continue the relationships with Mr. Harriman on the same basis as heretofore. So nothing will change. In a colorful gesture, Hapag's Nazi chairman Helferreich sent the line's president across the Atlantic on a Zeppelin to confirm with their New York friends, their New York financial supporters, or some would say string pullers. After the meeting with the Zeppelin passenger, the Harriman Bush office replied, "I am glad to learn that Mr. Helfenreich has stated that relations between the Hamburg American line and ourselves will be continued on the same basis as heretofore." 2 months before moving against Bush's Union Banking Co., um, the U.S. government ordered the seizure of all property of the Hamburg American line and the North German Lloyd under the Trading with the Enemies Act. Investigators noted in the pre-seizure report that Christian J. Beck was still acting as an attorney representing the Nazi firm. In May 1933, just after the Hitler regime had consolidated, an agreement was reached in Berlin for the coordination of all Nazi commerce within the USA. The Harriman International Co., led by Averell Harriman's first cousin Oliver, was to head a syndicate of 150 firms and individuals to conduct all exports from Hitler's Germany to the United States. This pact had been negotiated in Berlin between Hitler's economics minister, Hjalmar Schacht, who we just spoke of who we spoke of earlier, and it was also um, John Foster Dulles, international attorney for dozens of Nazi enterprises, with the counsel of Max Warburg and Kurt von Schroeder. It was instrumental in shaping the transnational financial agreements during the Nazi era. Um, Dulles would later go on to become U.S. Secretary of State, a major power in the Republican Party in the 50s. His friendship and that of his brother Allen Dulles, head of the CIA, greatly aided Prescott Bush in becoming the Republican U.S. Senator from Connecticut. Um, it was to be of inestimable value to George Bush in his ascent to the heights of, the deep state. That both the Dulles brothers were lawyers for the Bush's families in their efforts abroad. So throughout the 30s, John Foster Dulles, arranged debt restructuring for the German firms under a series of decrees issued by Adolf Hitler. In these deals, Dulles struck a balance between the interest owed to selected larger investors and the needs of the growing Nazi war apparatus. So Dulles wrote to Prescott Bush in 1937 concerning one such arrangement. The German Atlantic Cable Company, which owned Nazi Germany's only telegraph channel in the United States, had made debt and management agreements with the Walker Harriman Bank during the 1920s. And a new decree would now void those agreements, which had originally been reached with the non-Nazi corporate officials. Dulles asked Bush, who managed these affairs for Averell Harriman, to get Averell's signature on a letter to Nazi officials agreeing on these changes. And in that letter from John Foster Dulles to Prescott Bush on September the 22nd, 1937, uh, Bush Bush receives, Dear Press, I looked over the letter of the German American cable company to Averell Harriman. It would appear that the only rights in the matter are those which inure in the bankers, and that no legal embarrassment would result, so far as the bondholders are concerned, by your acquiescence in the modification of the bankers' agreement. Sincerely yours, John Foster Dulles. Dulles enclosed a proposed draft reply. Bush got Harriman's signature, and the changes went through. So, in conjunction with these arraignments, the German Atlantic Cable Company attempted to stop payment on its debts to smaller American bondholders, and the money was to be used for arming the Nazi state under a decree under Hitler's government. So the Bushes and the Dulleses were busy, but despite these busy efforts, a New York court decided that this particular Hitler law was invalid in the United States, and small bondholders, not necessarily uh, the major parties in the deals, but they retained their rights between the bankers and the Nazis, and they were entitled to get paid. So in this and a few other attempted swindles, the attendant victims did come out with their money, but the Nazi financial and political reorganization went ahead uh, to its tragic climax for the German people. For his part in Hitler's revolution, Prescott Bush made a fortune, and this is the legacy that he left to his sons. And just a little important historical note: how the Harrimans hired Hitler. It was not inevitable that millions would be slaughtered under World War II. At certain moments of crisis, crucial pro-Nazi decisions were made outside of Germany. These decisions were more aggressive than the mere appeasement that the Anglo-American historians later preferred to discuss. Um, Private armies of 300 to 400,000 paramilitary terrorists aided the Nazis' rise to power. W.A. Harriman's Hamburg America line uh, intervened against Germany in 1932 in an attempt to break them up. 1929 to 1931 economic collapse bankrupted the Wall Street-backed German steel trusts when the German government took over the trust stock, shares, and interests associated with Konrad Adenauer and the anti-Nazi Catholic Center Party uh, had attempted to acquire them, but the Anglo-Americans, Montagu Norman, and the Harriman Bush Bank ensured that their Nazi ally Fritz Thyssen regained control over the shares and the trust. And Thyssen's financial support for Hitler continued unhindered.
Can I stop you
So,
there?
yeah,
It's coming up on 2 a.m. for me, and I'm about to pass out. I was looking at how many pages we got left. I don't even know if I can make it through. I know you only got a few left.
yeah, I just want to put a little bow on this, if I may.
All right.
Uh, I'm sorry, brother. I want to try and wrap this up because we're
Sure.
we're we're almost done. So I'll just breeze through this. Unpayable debts crushed Germany in the 20s, stemming from the reparations from the Versailles Treaty. Um, Germany was looted by the New York banking system, and Hitler's propaganda exploited this burden. Yet immediately after Hitler's dictatorship was established, uh, the 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 Americans granted debt relief, freeing funds to arm the Nazi state, as I discussed. Um, Felix Warburg of Kuhn Loeb and Co. Executed the Hitler finance plan in New York. Kuhn Loeb asked North German Lloyd bondholders to accept new lower interest steamship bonds issued by Kuhn Loeb, and in place of more favorable pre-Hitler bonds. New York attorney Jacob Chotkin, father of co-author Anton Chotkin, represented many bondholders who rejected this idea, but representing a woman who was owed $30 on an old steamship bond, Chotkin threatened a writ from the sheriff, tying up a liner to get her $30. American Jewish Congress hired Jacob Chotkin as legal director to boycott against Nazi Germany. The American Federation of Labor cooperated with Jewish and other groups in the anti-import boycott. Uh, but on the other side, virtually all Nazi trade with the United States was supervised by Harriman interests and functionaries such as Prescott Bush. And the Warburgs demanded that the American Jews not agitate against the Hitler government or join the organized boycott. And again, this was organized by B'nai B'rith and the American Jewish Committee. So the Warburgs were quite involved. B'nai B'rith was heavily involved in silencing any anti-Nazi sentiment, and eventually Hitler rose to power 1932 after federal election. Um, he was sworn in as chancellor and head of the coalition government on the 30th of January 1933. He had asked the president, Paul von Hindenburg, to dissolve the Reichstag and call for a new election, with the date set for March 5th, 1933. He had hoped to abolish democracy. This article states in a quasi-legal fashion. The Enabling Act was a special law that gave the chancellor power to pass laws by decree without the involvement of the Reichstag. These special powers would remain in effect for 4 years. Um,
That's literally
during the
what
election,
Zelensky did.
in again what's attempting to be done in our government now. So the Reichstag fire was an arson in the Reichstag building, home of the German Parliament, on the 27th of February 1933. 4 weeks later, Hitler was sworn in as Chancellor of Germany. A Dutch communist was said to be the culprit. The Nazis attributed the fire to these communist agitators, and it was a pretext to claim that the communists were plotting against the German government, including the president, Paul von Hindenburg. And it suspended civil liberties and gave the Nazi party, quite a deal of power. And then the first report of the fire um, made and caused the arrests of communists and including all communist Reichstag delegates. This severely crippled the communist participation in the March elections. After the elections, after the absence of the communists, the Nazi Party expanded its power. On the 9th of March, Prussian state police arrested some Bulgarians. Um, and other communists were arrested. Van der Lubbe and four other communists were the defendants in the trial that started in September, and ended in an acquittal for the four communists, but the conviction of Van der Lubbe, who was executed in 2008. Germany posthumously pardoned Van der Lubbe, and but this was the false flag, I would say, that helped Hitler come into power. And just to tie this up with a little bow, I mean, I say you will know a man by his fruits. This could be found in the book of Matthew 7, chapter 7, 15 through 20. Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. You shall know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns or figs of thistles? Even so, every good tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore, by their fruits ye shall know them. And this gets into the idea that Hitler rebuilt a synagogue that was bombed. Uh, in the Associated Press, uh, written in Dublin in August 10th. Hitler, believe it or not, has rebuilt a synagogue as bombers almost destroyed. At least money from the German uh, legation on Hitler's orders is being paid to the Jewish community whose synagogue was damaged by the German bombers 2 years ago. The bombing resulted in strong protests by Prime Minister De Valera. Hitler sent a personal apology to the Ayer government and ordered the Jewish community reimbursed. And then there's a photo of Jews at the swimming pool in Novaki. Jews had ballrooms, they had maternity wards, they had orchestras, they were put on trains and sent far from the war. Why not send them to the front lines? Why not send them to the meat grinder like the German people were? So, in my opinion, I believe these Jews were um, put in a position that they would survive what would happen to Germany. And just to put a little bow on this, um, the, Hitler and the Nazis arrest Baron Rothschild in 1939, but ordered his release after they received $20 million, which was handed over to Hitler. And the Rothschild family is going about seeking to have that money repaid by Germany, which is hilarious. And my thing is, if you're gonna round up a Rothschild and you have that man in your possession, why not hang him? Why not shoot him by a firing squad? Why send the Jews far from the war? Why rebuild a synagogue? I I just I find it hard to believe that he was naive or just a a stooge, or that he was hoping to get over when there's reason to believe he's fled to Nazi Germany. I'm sorry, he fled to Argentina and he lived out his life in peace. And Ava Braun was a Jew.
I'll have to go and reread that um, later. I did put up all those images while you were talking about them.
Thank you. Well, with that said, I know you're exhausted, and the last thing I want to do is keep you here any longer than necessary. But I think we were able to cover the meat of what I wanted to discuss. I was hoping we could have some back and forth a little bit further, but
Yeah,
I,
I
I'm co-
was, I was, I wasn't expecting to get this tired.
and I'm comfortable,
We can
ra
revisit like these last 10 pages like next time, or you didn't work today. Oh, well, I guess it was a holiday.
yeah, we had the day off at Labor Day. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of information to consider with what's being presented. And as I said, Matthew 7:15 through 20, you know a man by his fruits. But that's not up, I'll leave it up to the listener to decide. But
Yeah,
a
because
little fruit
I'll have to go through all of that stuff. Definitely like those last 5 pages.
there's definitely food for thought. And with that said, thank you everyone who participated and listened today. Um, I know some of that information was pretty data heavy and was getting into the weeds, but I think it was essential to cover some of these relationships between the Bush family, the Harrimans, the Walker family, and Thyssen Steele, just to paint that picture. But yeah, good times. With that
Sorry.
said, no, you're good. With that said, you know,
Let
I'm
me
cool wrapping up here.
play fucking Slav Baby's fucking video that he wants me to play, even though I want to go to fucking sleep. Here, here is the PM of Poland, Gregor's Braun. And that's him putting out the menorah in
Oh, I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
in their parliament with a fire extinguisher. So, all right. Let me shut off the stream, and you guys have a good night. Thank you for watching. And